Hey guys, I'm back for another part of our series through the book of Exodus, and this being your next Grow Group Help. Remember, you can go back and review chapters 1 through 2. I know that I was not able to go through every single part of chapters 1 through 2 because we're just so limited on time. Um, and I'm trying to go through the whole book of Exodus in a semester, which obviously has its challenges. But I appreciate your time and diligence in looking over some of the material going into next week. Um, excuse me. One of the things that I wanted to, or there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you from Exodus 3 through 4. So, again, we're going to be in chapters 3 through 4 as of this coming Sunday. Um, a lot of cool things from this, and then one peculiar story at the end of it. If you have not read through chapter 4, you probably know or will know what I'm talking about once you get to chapter 4. But basically, this is the call Moses gets by God. And so there's a lot of cool little nuggets that you can see through here that reveal foreshadowing of things to come. One of them is specifically the burning of the bush. If you look at verse 1 of chapter 3, it talks about that he came to Mount Horeb. Mount Horeb is the same place as Mount Sinai. So basically, God's meeting Moses at Mount Sinai, and that's just another reminder that he's going to meet him back there. That God calls him, says, "Hey, I'm going to deliver you, but then you're going to come back to this mountain and worship." So the main overarching direction is God's delivering his people for a purpose, and the purpose is to worship him. And you're seeing that every single part of the Exodus. He says, I'm going to deliver, and it's going to be my terms, and it's going to be my power, and you're going to worship me. And that's how it's going to go. Notice also a couple of interesting things. He reveals himself in fire. That's not abnormal. God does that. God also reveals himself as in the presence or the manifestation of the angel of the Lord. So when an angel of the Lord came, it was an angel of the Lord, but it was revealing the Lord's presence. So the Lord's actual presence was there, but it came in the manifestation of that angel in the burning bush. So then you get into verse 4, chapter 3. He basically calls Moses, Moses, here I am. You've heard that many times in the book of Genesis when you hear about God calling Abraham, where he says, Abraham, Abraham, before he's going to test him. Or actually, it's in the midst of the testing. Jacob, when he hears a dream, he calls him Jacob, Jacob. Samuel, in the midst of a dream, Samuel, Samuel. Like you hear this constantly, and then God's response or the person's response to God's call. Then you see repeated all throughout the whole entire thing of I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Two things to remember in this. Number one, God is letting Moses know I'm a God of people who are living. So even though Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have physically died, they are actually very much alive and well in the people of Israel because their offspring continued, and that was a sign of God's blessing and his promise. Okay? The other thing was his reminder that he actually was listening, he was seeing, he was hearing all the different circumstances of suffering they were going through. He reminds that later in chapter 3. Then he calls them my people. And it's another reminder that God has chosen a people, the people of Israel. So he has a special relationship with them. And he's going to bring them to a special land. And this land is occupied by the nations. That's the reason why it talks about the territory of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So it goes through all those different nations. He says, hey, that's going to be your land. Even though they may seem more powerful than you, it's going to be your land. Then you get into kind of this back and forth conversation between Moses and God. And just to kind of give a summary of it, because I could go through the whole entire thing in detail. Every answer of Moses' insufficiency, God answers with his sufficiency. What am I supposed to do? Who am I to go do this? And God says, I'm going to be with you. I will be with you. I'm going to deliver you. What am I supposed to say about your name? I am. And basically what God's letting them know, and this is something I learned from a scholar that I read and someone I listened to, is God's not limited to what we think he is. Or he's not even limited to our thoughts and our processes. We can't put him in a box. God is going to reveal himself over time. That's the reason why he kind of leaves it in our in our sense, vague. He reveals himself perfectly and fully, but he's going to fulfill it even more to the fullest extent by revealing himself, how he delivers his people, how he rescues them, how he commits judgment against Egypt for their offense against God, for offending God and offending His plans. Um, and it's all again for worship. And then Moses goes into this whole aspect of, well, I don't know if they're going to believe. What if they don't believe me if I say this thing? And he's basically highlighting, hey, what's in your hand? Well, Moses doesn't really have any power to give. So God says, hey, I'm going to give you a staff. It's going to turn into a serpent. You're going to take water out of the Nile. It's going to turn into blood. Take your hand out. It's going to turn into leprosy. And this is God showing, hey, I've got all this power over creation, nature, and people. You just need to trust me and know that I'm the one that gives you power. It's not anything you're going to do. And to generate belief, it's not going to be based on how much you give them or how much yourself you reveal to me. It's going to be because I reveal myself to them. It's going to be because I change their heart. Notice he says that Pharaoh and his people will not believe, but God's people will believe Israel. It even talks about that Pharaoh's heart will be hardened. Now, that's a really tough thing to talk about, but let's not ignore it and let's not sway away from it. Let's not swerve from it. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He did it, okay? But this is not saying that Pharaoh was like, oh, God, I want to repent. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then God was like, no. Whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So Pharaoh did not call on God's name. He did not believe. So he hardened his heart as well. So they both are true. God hardened his heart and Pharaoh hardened his heart. And you're going to see that language in the book of Exodus. So don't be confused. Don't confuse students by, the whole, predestination argument and all that stuff. The main thing that you need to get across is God's in charge of saving people and He can do it through us. That's all we need to know. And then Moses is like, I can't speak. He makes another excuse. And it's just another reminder of all the excuses we make in our calling. Like, oh, God, I can't do that. And then he gets to the point where he commands God, you need to send someone else. And then God's angry, but then he subsides his anger and says, okay, you know what? Since you're going to be like that, I'll give you Aaron. I'll give you your brother who actually can speak very eloquently, and he's going to be the one to go before you, and he will be your mouth. And that sounds really weird, but it says literally, he will serve as your mouth, and you will be like God to him. So essentially, Moses would be receiving the message from God as that mediator, and then Moses would take that message, give it to Aaron. Aaron would speak it. And that's part of that mediator role that Moses and Aaron are taking that Jesus fully fulfills. Last but not least, I know I'm going to go close to 10 minutes, but I think it's important. Let's also highlight chapter 4 of the part where it talks about the weird story of chapter 4, verse 24. God is like intending to put Moses to death. We're like, why? Why would he do that? It seems like he was very patient. So Zipporah, in verse 25, Zipporah is the lady that Moses married when Moses came to Midian when he ran away from Pharaoh. That's something that I didn't get to fully mention last week, but I will fully mention it this week. And Ruel, who is the dad, is Jethro. They're the same dude, okay? So you're going to see that in that as well. Well, Zipporah takes a flint knife, cuts off her son's foreskin, and threw it in Moses' feet. Okay, so this lady, Zipporah, does circumcision on her son, and then throws the foreskin of the circumcision at his feet. Okay, where are we going with this? Couple thoughts I had, couple thoughts I gained from listening to some great people on a podcast. Number one, this is a foreshadowing that the shedding of blood was needed for there to be atonement. Circumcision was a sign that, and a sign of a covenant with God's people. Moses should have been the one to circumcise his son because that was a part of God's law and God's plan. Now, the law had not been instituted yet, but God had commanded in the Abrahamic covenant that there must be circumcision for that to be the sign for God's people. Well, Moses, I guess he didn't do that. And so Zipporah is essentially revolted at the sense of, like, why have you not done that? And then she says, you are a bridegroom of blood to me. And so basically, Moses should have done that, but then Zipporah acts as this person for atonement for not just her son, but really for Moses so that he's not killed by God. So there's the shedding of blood that spares someone from death. Well, what does that sound like? It sounds like the gospel, that because of the shedding of Christ's blood, we're spared from death. Same thing it foreshadows, and even in the Passover, that the shedding of blood would be the atonement of a spotless lamb for the people of Israel and for those who trusted in Yahweh. But those who did not, which included a lot of the Egyptians, they would be sacrificed. They would not be the firstborn of God's people. They would be the ones that would be the firstborn that are killed. Um, so anyway, that's a really good gospel explanation. Couple things tying together is this. Number one, remind students that they can talk about all their weaknesses, all their insufficiencies, and students will make a lot of um, they'll make a lot of excuses. And we make excuses, not just students. And we have to come to the realization of we have no excuses. If God's called us to something and He's equipped us with the tools, even with the weaknesses, we can take those weaknesses and use it for His kingdom purposes. But overall, the main point is not us. The main point is God's power and His plan that we're going to see unravel continually all throughout the story. And I pray that this will be an encouraging video for you as you listen to this and get you ready for this week for Grow Groups. I will see you on Sunday night for Grow Groups.